Have you ever told yourself, I'll take the leap when I feel more confident? What if we've had it backwards all along? What if it isn't confidence that comes first? What if confidence is simply the evidence you collect after choosing to take courage? In today's conversation, I sit down with Bernice McDonald, creator of the Tiny Brave Steps method, to explore what really happens inside of us when fear convinces us to wait. Together, we unpack the hidden belief of I'm not enough, why so many people spend years seeking approval instead of trusting themselves, and how one small, courageous decision can begin to change the trajectory of an entire life. Bernice shares the deeply personal experiences that transformed her relationship with fear, the surprising way she learned to stop letting it make her decisions, and why courage isn't about becoming fearless. It's about deciding that what matters most is more important than staying comfortable. If you've ever felt caught between the life you're living and the life you know is possible, this conversation will remind you that transformation doesn't begin with 100% certainty. It begins with one intentional choice. Welcome to the Conquering FUDDD podcast. I am your host, Pennie Wilson, and today we have our guest, Bernice McDonald. Bernice, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell them about where your life is now.
I am what I call a courage architect. That is a name that AI finally coined for me because what I do is I create spaces for women who are in midlife, in that middle journey of their life, and they are looking for that path through. We face a lot of transitions during that time. So what I recognize is that many of us come into that space feeling not enough. And that really hinders us from moving forward into the future that we could have. And what I saw happening so much with my own mom and my own precious aunts, who were her sisters, they were quite a collection. Many of them had so many gifts inside. And what I saw happen was that they shrunk away, believing that after 50, they were pretty much done. Their life was pretty much over. Their kids were raised. And so they just settled in to their lives and waited to die and didn't really think that their desire they had inside was really worth pursuing in any large way. I thought that was so sad. And
Wow.
so it motivated me when I got to
Mhm.
that age to keep going,
Mm.
to really believe in my own purpose and who I am and that I'm here for a reason. What I came to believe and have believed for many years is that we all have gifts inside and we all have a reason to be here and to be here right to the end of our lives, not to go quietly out. That led me into my work with women, working in the arena of courage, helping them to not just have the courage to discover who they really are and the gifts inside, but also have the courage to put that into action, to discover that passion inside and decide, where do I want to take this? How could I help change the world? Because what I've observed is that at this age, we kind of laser focus and all of our wisdom comes together into a place of passion where we can share that passion and give it away to help transform other people in some way.
That's so beautiful. I love that inspiring story. And that's the core of why you do what you do, to truly help other women be inspired to find their gifts, to live their purpose. Because one of the things I continually find over and over again is that fulfillment and contribution, that's the things that make life matter. That's truly where we feel joy. So I love that you're helping women to find that. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I would love to go now back to the beginning, before the Tiny Brave Steps existed. Where were you and what was life like for you?
When I think about my backstory, a lot of times what I think of is how I grew into this story, my own story about being not enough. And I was raised in a loving home. I had four siblings. We were all very close together, very small house, parents who were doing the best they could with all the noise and confusion, et cetera, et cetera. And also raised in a good church community. However, looking back, I was second oldest. And for some reason, things I picked up in my childhood and especially in the whole church community, because back then the rules were really big, right? You had
Mm,
to live by the rules. And so if you didn't live by the rules, even God was mad at you. So,
yes.
and I was a little girl who was frustrated because I just couldn't seem to get it right. I tried so hard to be good, and I
Mm,
always felt like I was bad and I didn't measure up. And listening to all the stories, in the teachings that I had, and even observing who I was within my family and with my friends, I just felt like I wasn't enough. And so I grew up looking for that confirmation, for somebody to say you are good enough. And so that led me into a marriage that was perhaps not the best choice for me, fitting a round a peg into a square hole. 24 years I was married and it didn't go well. And so after that time, I was in my late 40s and I left that marriage and went through what I call my metamorphosis at that
mm,
age. 6 years of really seeking and trying to figure out who I was. I made so many mistakes and it's embarrassing even to think about who I was during the first half of that time. But it was all, as I was in that dark place, I began to really think about who I am and who I wanted to be. And I could see I had never been myself. I
mm,
was always trying to please everybody else and always trying to get the nod. You know what
mm,
I
mm.
mean?
Approval. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that led me to really thinking about what it takes to become somebody. And I also had trained as a life coach at that time because it was a brand new profession,
Mm,
fascinated me. I got my certification just before I left my marriage. So the only thing I could really do, because I wasn't exactly in the shape to be coaching clients, was to learn more. And so I started to get into relationship coaching courses. And I thought, I certainly do need to learn this. But through all of that, what happened was I really came to a place where I knew and I could say, this is who I am. I like being that person. And that's the person I'm going to stand up for from now on. And interestingly enough, after all my blunders and mismatches in love, even during that time, I met my second husband.
mm,
And going into that marriage, it was so totally different. And having lived in that marriage now for the past 14 years, it's a totally different experience than the first half of my life was. So, this is what I want to help women experience.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that story reflects truly who we are on the inside is part of how we interact with the world and create those relationships. And what we believe about ourselves is what creates that experience with who we attract and how our life ends up forming. And I love that you were able to recognize from your growing up years that feeling of not enoughness and how it led you into people pleasing and the things that weren't what you wanted. And then finding that moment of truly, who am I? Who's that person in there that I love? So, inside that metamorphosis moment or stage of 6 years, did you find a particular turning point, something that helped you truly find the grounding, or what was that experience like for you?
Well, yes, I did. And I can say now that much of what my work is built on what I discovered there. You know, I, I think that the first thing that I really had to find was that I was afraid. I had so many fears. Fears like, yes, we can say the fear of not being enough, but that permeates into so much of how we, like, as you said, interact in the world. And the place where I really learned this was in that whole world of dating again,
Mm,
because it was, scary, But I came out of my marriage with this intention, which also taught me something. I had my eye on the fact that I wanted to know what it was like to be in a real love by the time I died. And those were my exact words.
mm,
Before I die, I want to know what love really feels like, a real love. And so to do that, I realized, and this all kind of came into place with the relationship coaching courses I was taking, I had to learn to date. And
mm,
so I went on a journey researching dating and how that happened, when you're in your 40s and 50s and how that looks. And I discovered a coach there who had this program called Have the Relationship You Want. And her name was Rory Ray. And what she said, and I devoured her stuff. What she said was, okay, if you're going to find love, you have to date. If you're going to date, fear is going to show up. So this is what I want you to do when it does. I want you to look that fear in the eye and I want you to say to it, I hear you, fear. I appreciate you trying to keep me safe from being hurt again, but I want you to go over there in the corner and eat a cookie because I need to make this decision about where I'm going from here. I'm the boss. I decide who I'm going to be and how I'm going to be that. And if I want to grow, I need to make these decisions, even though I can hear you talking away over there in the corner. And so, that became a practice for me. I would recognize the fact that fear is here in the room, but I am deciding that what I'm doing is more important than letting that fear hold me back. And so I began to go out and I would just relax with men, lean back. That was another thing she said, lean back and let them talk, get to know them. This is not necessarily the person you're going to marry. Just get to
Mhm.
know them as a person.
Mhm.
And they feel just as uncomfortable as you. And it became a lesson for life, really,
Mhm.
for me. And so as time went on and I found my husband and we got married, both of us realized we live with a lot of fear. And
Mhm.
so we started to practice that kind of a thing, that you can be afraid, but you need to take a step forward and do what you want to do anyways or need to do and be the boss of that fear. And I realized this is a solution for women who have all these barriers to hold them back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that it begins by recognizing what is that fear? What is the thing? And that's what I love to do is help people work actually through the mental gymnastics of what's
Yeah.
happening in that inner experience and finding out, we call it FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, dread, and discouragement, right? And finding how to shift that. And I love that you gave it an identity. You probably
Mm.
gave some visuals to a character, even a name, and gave it an instruction of what to do. Like, nope, you're not in the driver's seat anymore. You're gonna
Eh,
sit in the corner. I love it. That's so empowering. So beautiful.
yeah. And the
Mhm.
name I gave it was Fred. And I
See?
exactly where that name came from over time.
Yeah.
I read another example in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. She
Mhm.
talks about the fear of being a creator and how difficult it is for some creators to actually put their work out there in the world. So
Yeah.
she said she writes a letter to her fear. And she said, I know you are always going to be here and you are welcome in my life because you're my protector.
Mm.
However, and just like you said, you can ride in the car with me. You are always welcome here, but you will never be driving.
Yes.
And so, I put these things together and my fear, I shrunk because I used to think of it. I have a very imaginative mind. And
Mhm.
princesses always have thrilled me, right? And
Yes.
journeys and knights and castles. So I would
Mhm.
picture fear as being this big fire breathing dragon that
Yeah.
flew around my castle trying to keep me safe, kind of like Sleeping Beauty. Remember the story of Sleeping Beauty? And she
Yeah.
was asleep, and the thorns grew up around the castle. And then there was this dragon that protected her
Mhm.
and kept her inside. Well, what I started to do is I became Sleeping Beauty who woke up. And
Mhm.
the dragon, I shrunk down to this little friendly dragon, kind of like a Disney character. And that's where I named him Fred. And he
Mhm.
has become a companion to me rather than a threat to me. And, he's kind of like an advisor that
Mhm.
tells me, hey, this thing is important to you because you're feeling this fear.
Yeah.
Or what are you exactly thinking is going to happen here? Because you're feeling that fear feeling. So, what is it that you're afraid of? And also asking the question, is your life in danger? Because, of course, fear is given to us for that. If it
Mhm.
is, run. But if
Yeah.
not, maybe there is something here that you need to make a choice. Who
Mhm.
are you going to be here right now in the middle of this fear? Do you want to run or do you want to be the person that stands up to it and says, thank you very much for trying to protect me. I want you to go over there in the corner and eat a cookie, though. I'll still hear you chirping away or get in the back seat of the car, but I'm going to be driving. I'm going to be making the decisions.
So
So,
beautiful. The mind is so powerful, isn't it? You create those visualizations and shrinking the dragon. And I love it.
yeah.
I love that's exactly how transformation happens on the inside. When we choose to take control of what we're thinking and imagining. So the ripple effect of what you're thinking on the inside. And I love that you're describing that so beautifully. How did things start to shift for you on the outside as you created that safety on the inside?
Well, that kind of became the third part of this whole mechanism. And that was I started to take steps. And they eventually morphed into, thank you to AI, tiny brave steps. Because if you really fear's there, but courage doesn't really show up until you take a step forward, until you establish yourself as the authority here in your own life. And you actually put your foot out and take that step. And really, what I did, because when I met my second husband, we talked a lot about fear in our lives and about how regrets from our past life and how we wanted our life to look going forward. We both wanted to be more courageous. We both wanted to take more chances and be those people that take risks so I said to him, I've always wanted to go whitewater rafting, but I never have seen myself as a person that would ever have the courage to do that. And as we were talking, he took note of that and he went and booked us a trip. And so we went because we live only a couple of hours from the mountains, and we went on this wild, crazy river whitewater rafting. And again, that became such a life lesson for me
Yeah.
because, I was terrified to think of that because your imagination, of course, envisions, and that's Fred talking. What if you fall out of the raft? What if you hit your head on a rock? That water's so cold, you're going to freeze when you get in there. All of these things because he knows the history of,
Mhm.
and he knows what can happen. So he's going to try to keep you safe. So he's
Mhm.
always talking. So what I imagined doing was leaving him in the car. I got out. Took the steps into the place where they give you the instruction, put on the wetsuit as they told me to,
Mm.
went through all the motions, stood in the line waiting to get on the raft, and then got in the raft and then went on the trip and then realized that the guides are very expert at doing this
Mhm.
and how beautiful it was around me, like
Mhm.
let go of the grip off the side.
Yeah.
And so, I came through that, and when I got back on the dry land, it's like, "Wow, I did that."
Yeah.
I did that in small steps. It took
Mhm.
small steps to actually accomplish that, but I did it. So we did a lot of other things like that. We walked on fire at a Tony Robbins event. We went ziplining, which I am totally terrified of heights. I mean, totally. I cried while I was
Wow.
doing that. But,
Wow.
we went on this huge indoor roller coaster at West Edmonton Mall spontaneously. It's like we were standing there and we had contemplated it a couple of times, and then finally we were there. Once it was about 5 hours away from where we live, and we said, "Okay, today's the day. We're gonna do it." So we bought our tickets and we got on the worst roller coaster ride of our
Oh.
lives.
Oh.
My eyes were closed the whole time. But every time I did something like that, and I'm not saying you have to do things that huge, but
Mm.
for me, what it did was shake up that fearful person inside and to say, you don't have to be afraid of fear. What you have to do is decide that you're going to take a step forward and be courageous because the courage will show up once you take the step and you see, well, it really wasn't that bad. Like
Mm.
all the awful things I thought were going to happen didn't happen.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
courage comes and you grow from that. So you get evidence every time
Mm.
you do something like
Exactly.
you get
Yes. Exactly. I love that you're stepping into that growth zone with intentionality, like you decided together. This is who we want to be. This is who we want to experience. And just letting go of the fear, taking that one little step at a time. And then after your action, you felt that evidence. That's exactly like the pattern that I've been noticing is so many people think that confidence comes and then they can take action. Your
yes.
story is the opposite. You first have a desired intention, you move toward it, you take action, and then you feel the confidence.
Yes.
It's so beautiful. So,
And it applies in so many ways then to the small things that come up in your life.
Mhm.
Like even if you're starting a business, even if you are contemplating dating, even if you are afraid your child is going off the rails or whatever, you can face the fear then. And you've done this before, you can do it. Like you start to apply those principles and that courage into your everyday life.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where the rubber meets the road for sure. Of like when you're taking action and applying things and really shifting your outside experiences, which happened first because you
Yes.
shifted the inside. And I love this. So, the identity piece, I'm curious how you saw yourself before that person that was afraid, maybe the reflection of how you became like your aunts, or if there was a part of you that shied away from all those scary feelings. Then you had that decision, the transformation experience inside of that 6-year period. How do you see yourself differently now as compared to before?
I am so different. I mean, really, I have loved this half of my life in
Mhm.
every way because I feel fear, but and I think before because I was constantly measuring my worth and whether I was doing the right thing. And I noticed this even after, once I was married, once I was working in my career, I was in a admin assistant to the director of addiction and mental health. I watched myself and I could see that I wasn't sure if about anything I tried or anything I did or even what I offered. There was a tentativeness about me. There was a does that person approve? Because I'm so I can sense when people are, disapproving. And,
Mhm.
I think that's why as a little girl, I always felt like I was bad because I could read people's faces. So that's the person I was then. But once I began to take the steps and do the scary things, I started to even near the end, like it took me 10 years of really coaching women on the side. I had to work full time because I had come through a divorce. And so I was supporting myself that way and growing as a coach on the side. But even there, as I wasn't sure if I could help people. There was always that tentativeness about
Yeah.
me until I started to understand that I am made a certain way. I have gifts. I don't have to be like anybody else. I can, what I learned was when I would compare myself to somebody to then ask the question or to say to myself, yeah, you're not like them, but you have strengths in other areas. And so I began to focus on what was good about me, where I could help people, where I was strong. And I started to notice people compliment me or appreciate certain things about me that I took for granted. I
Mm.
call those strange jewels now because, it's kind of the thing inside of us that's the most beautiful thing we've been given to live this life with or out of. And we ignore it because we think it's common or it's not like somebody else has or it's weird or like our perspective we never really think that we have something intelligent good to say that we have something to offer. And I think slowly over time what happened was I realized that my heart is big and that it's precious and that I had to get out of my head and into that heart, realize what my gifts were, and then start to walk into a room heart first, in a way, walk into a coaching call, a heart first, just seeing the other person, recognizing what was going on with them, knowing they're just as scared as I am.
Mm.
So, how can I bring what I know and who I am into this conversation to give them space to be who they are? So, I love the fact that now I still am afraid to do things, but I have a way of handling that fear now. And I can say, oh, this is Fred talking.
Yes.
Who do I want to be here?
Yes.
I wanna be brave.
Mhm.
I don't wanna shrink because I'm afraid. If there's another reason for me to back off, that's fine, but I'm the one who needs to make that decision,
I
and
love
then I take a step,
Mhm.
whichever way that goes. Out of that person I want to be, that's where
Mhm.
I try to take the step. That's
So
where
beautiful.
that's where actually you start to feel more and more confident
Yeah.
about taking the step. because you
Yeah.
trust yourself
Mm.
more and you give yourself room to be who you are.
Yeah, yeah. My goodness, there's so much beauty in that. And I feel like going toward that person that you are becoming shifts the whole perspective of the personal development world because so often people focus on what's wrong with me? What do I need to diagnose? Looking at the fear. Yes, that's important. But the most important thing you could do is shift. What do you want and who are you becoming? So I love that that becomes an intentional choice, that you're moving toward that person intentionally. So much beauty there. Like, and then one of the questions I was thinking, like the patterns that you're noticing of the people that you're helping shift, it sounded like there was comparison. It sounded like there was living within that box of following the expectations, the rules. What patterns stand out to you most as you help clients shift from their old self to their new self?
Well, I mean, the whole not enough language, right?
Mm.
And I had a lot of this myself too. I can't do that. Or I I'm not talented enough to do that. Like I'm not as good as this person over here. Therefore, I'm not even going to go there. Or I don't deserve that. That's more of a subconscious one, but it's almost like I know I looked at my dad, and my dad I loved very much and developed a a whole journey of a relationship with him. And he passed away a couple of years ago. But by then, I cherished him so much. But my dad lived under a glass ceiling. It was like, you can only go this high and then you're not meant for more. This is only you. This is where your family was at. And so this is where you stay. You're not really, you don't, you just can't go higher than that. All of those are the things that we tell ourselves. And really, that's again our fear talking to us, saying, you want to do what? You think you could do what? That's where, again, I say to break out of that, you have to go and prove to yourself that, yes, I can go past.
Yeah.
I can zip line. I can jump out of an airplane. I never did this, and I'm not sure I ever. But, like you've got to somehow break the thought that you cannot be the person that you would love to be. And
Yeah.
if you have that vision of yourself, I kind of picture it like, there's us and then there's that future self across the cavern. And it's like a deep cavern between
Mm.
us.
Yeah.
And our job is to build a bridge between now and there. And you need to shake yourself up somehow by taking a small step. One small step in that direction. Feel how it feels and know you didn't die, and then take
Mhm.
another step and start to just let yourself be who you are so
Yeah.
that you break out of those patterns.
I love it. And I love it sounds like it's the awareness of the language that actually just listening to the way that you talk, hearing yourself say, I can't do that, or where's that glass ceiling of what I'm saying that I can't do and what I'm limiting myself from. So I love that. That's beautiful, beautiful awareness. So, last question for you then is for someone listening today that feels something inside of them calling them forward toward what they want to create. And yet the fear convinces them that they need to wait or learn something more or become something before they can take action. What would you invite them to remember?
Well, my favorite quote for all time, and something that my husband and I actually carried from our relationship, the beginning, all the fear involved there, is by Ambrose Redmoon. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but it's a take on the quote that we hear a lot. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than the fear. That's the part I like about the way Ambrose Redmoon, who was a very obscure person back in the 60s, I think it was his only famous quote, but that's where it's a little bit different because he's saying there, what's important here? If you listen to the fear, where's it going to keep you? Like, where are you going to end up? But if you make the judgment that what you want to do and who you want to be is more important than this fear you feel, then that's where you decide what's your next step. Back off, go forward, live for the future, or dwell on the past. That's always the crux of the decision, right?
That is so beautiful. And it helps people tune in to truly what is most important, what matters within them, who they are, and what they want to create in life. Moving toward the fulfillment and the purpose is the point of life so we can have joy.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your story. It's beautiful to see what that pattern looks like. And I hope, listeners, that you can look at this story not only as hearing her story, but looking at your story, looking at what is the pattern of your hero's journey and where are you being guided to create what you are born to do. Thank you so much for listening today. This is Pennie Wilson, your host, signing off.